Okay, let's see if I still remember how to do this. Hello, friends and neighbors. So far, so good.
So what am I doing?
Hey, come on! It really
Thanks for joining me.
What are you filming for?
The intro was upside down, wasn't it? Damn it. So recently on my VU account, I was directed to a review done a couple of years ago of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. The reviewer in question is known as That Fellow in the Coat, or simply Mr. Coat, and the review he did was rather scathing. And as I was watching this very negative review of a film that I happen to like very much, I found myself getting a little perturbed. Because the review is not terribly credible, and at the very end of the video, Mr. Coat urged his viewers to not see Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And this got me to thinking about anti-recommendations. Of course, we all know what a recommendation is. That's when you go up to somebody or a group of somebodies and you say, "Oh, dude, you have got to read this book. You have got to watch this movie. You have got to eat at this restaurant." So, an anti-recommendation is the opposite of that. No. Like this. Oh man, don't read this book. Do not go see this movie. Don't even set foot in that restaurant. Anti-recommendations, I think, are something that we have all done at some point. I know that I've done it frequently on this channel. I mean, pretty much anytime I give a worth rating that is not in the top 2 tiers, I'm giving an anti-recommendation. Oh yeah, you should totally go see this movie, but don't see it in theaters. Wait till it comes out on DVD. But despite the fact that anti-recommendations are very common, and despite the fact that I've given quite a few of them myself, I kind of have mixed feelings about them. Because it's one thing to be very positive about something and tell people that they should experience this, but it's quite another to be very negative about something and tell people to avoid it. Because when you're telling somebody that they should avoid a particular experience, you're basically telling that person that you've done all the judging for them and they don't have to do any judging at all. This becomes especially dangerous when you're someone like me or someone like Mr. Coat and you are giving recommendations or anti-recommendations to a large audience of viewers. Or a semi-large audience. So why is it perfectly acceptable for me to, say, give a worthless rating to the musical Annie Warbucks, but it's not perfectly acceptable for Mr. Coat to give basically the same thing to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? Or perhaps a better question, why is it okay for me to put Cats as the #1 most overrated musical of all time? Well, by and large, I do think that it's okay to give anti-recommendations, but I do think that there are 3 things that you have to take into careful consideration. First, whatever you're reviewing, you have to consider the work that was put into it. This requires you to see the thing that you're reviewing from multiple points of view, and not just from your own point of view. For example, Mr. Coat was looking at Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from a very narrow point of view as someone who was looking for a faithful adaptation of the book Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Most of his criticisms revolved around this one point. It's not like the book, and therefore it's bad. And I am somewhat ashamed to admit I have done this exact same thing. One of my very first vlog driver reviews from like 3 years ago was me doing pretty much the same thing with Disney's The Little Mermaid. But when I did my more recent review of The Little Mermaid, the books versus movies review, I tried to look at it from many different points of view. So I looked at it from the point of view of an animator, of a director, of a musician, of a comedian, of a performer. And I came to realize that while I may not personally like Disney's The Little Mermaid, there are lots of good things about it. From an animation standpoint, the animation is top-notch. From a musician standpoint, the music is very, very good. From a comedian standpoint, the jokes are hilarious. From a feminist standpoint, well, okay, not so much, but there are plenty of good things about this movie despite the fact that I don't happen to like it. And if I were to look at the musical Cats in much the same way, I would say, yeah, the choreography is good, the makeup and the costumes are really, really great. This is a nice looking musical. There just doesn't happen to be a coherent story, which is what I personally was looking for. The second thing you have to take into consideration are the people who don't know anything about this thing that you're reviewing. Now obviously with something like Cats or The Little Mermaid or Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, that's not as much of an issue, but there are still going to be people out there who haven't heard of what you're reviewing. And you owe it to those people, no matter how small the population may be, to give as much objective information as you can about the thing that you're reviewing, so that maybe they can latch on to something that you say and think, well, maybe they don't like it, but it's possible that I might. And the third and most crucial thing that you have to consider when you're giving an anti-recommendation is the fanboys and the fangirls. No matter how much you might hate whatever it is that you happen to be reviewing, you have to consider the possibility that someone somewhere out there might like it. You have to imagine that there is some person out there who has a shrine dedicated to this thing that you loathe, and you have to ask and answer the question, why? When you're reviewing something that's popular, this becomes especially true. Mr. Coat even said at one point during the review, "I don't understand why this movie is so popular." And that was the problem with his review. He could not comprehend that people might like this movie, and therefore he could not look beyond his own narrow-minded viewpoint. And again, I'm not exempt from this. I kind of did the same thing with Cats. I did not really give it its due, though in my defense, I wasn't doing a full review of Cats, I was just doing it as part of a top 10 list. But still, even though I didn't indicate it in that particular video, I can understand why people might like this musical. It's energetic, the music is catchy, it looks really great, and if you are a cat person and you're not necessarily looking for a coherent story, then yeah, you can get some enjoyment out of watching this. The same thing is true of The Little Mermaid. I can understand why people like this movie, and I can even understand why people are drawn to the character of Ariel. I just don't happen to be. So that's what I think in terms of anti-recommendations. As always, I am very interested to find out what you think. Should we be giving anti-recommendations? Should we be telling people that they shouldn't go see or experience something? And if we should be telling them that, then what else do we need to be considering that I didn't cover in this video? I look forward to your comments and video responses, and until next time, this is Matt Guy reminding you that no matter how much you might despise something, there's someone out there who loves it. And my chair broke.